Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Life in the Cosmos with me, Riley Adair. And today, my friend Shae is with us.
Hi.
We're gonna do a story time episode. We're gonna tell the stories of the Sasquatch and Marie Laveau, Queen of Voodoo in New Orleans. So, totally unrelated though, completely unrelated stories. I don't know if Marie Laveau would be upset that she's with a Sasquatch story. But all right, Shay, you're gonna tell the story of the Sasquatch, right?
Yeah, I am. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
It's been funny because I feel like we've seen a lot of Sasquatch or Bigfoot memes lately, like Biggie the Foot with the vlogging videos. So it's been
Oh
everywhere
my
for me.
God, I've been
Yeah,
getting those. They're so funny.
I know they're hilarious. There was one today, and it was like someone's doing a Bigfoot mating call, and they don't sound sexy at all. I was just laughing while I was watching it. So it's funny. So it's nice to kind of learn a little bit more about him. So I got my information from the Stuff You Should Know podcast, Haunted Cosmos podcast, and then obviously I checked out Wikipedia and yeahnative.com. Okay, so let's get started just with a little bit of information about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, just so we all know. I feel like it's one of those, it's a really great example of like a local, or not local, but an urban legend that's been passed down through generations just by storytelling. Because I know that obviously there's a lot of pictures and everything and film and all of this hype around Bigfoot and Sasquatch, but me personally, I've only ever heard the lore just from people telling me stories as a kid and growing up hearing about it. So I think that that's really fun. Um, so do you know anything about Sasquatch or Bigfoot?
No, I only know that they hide from people because they saw like how colonization went down and they were like, well, we're not gonna try to be a part of that.
Yeah. There's so many different theories around Sasquatch, Bigfoot. I'm just going to use that interchangeably. So it's really funny. But yeah, that's one of them. Another one is that they are spiritual beings that kind of go between dimensions and they show up when they're needed here and to guide people, which is interesting.
Oh, that's crazy. So Sasquatch and Bigfoot are the same. Where are they? Do you know?
Yeah, so they're located in the Pacific Northwest. So that's like Oregon, Seattle, Washington, BC, Canada. They have, in terms of looks, they have large, muscular, bipedal, human-like, ape-like bodies, usually described with black, dark, or reddish hair. They're like 6 to 9 feet in general, but some of them have been reported to be as tall as 15 feet tall, which is crazy. And more than ape in the face region. And then another really key characteristic about Bigfoot is that they smell terrible.
Nope.
Oh no, I got excited. I was like, that's a big boy.
Yeah, no. So like the owner of the Bigfoot Discovery Museum said, imagine a skunk that had rolled around in dead animals and had hung around the garbage pits. Like just something disgusting.
Yeah, that's not sexy.
Yeah, not sexy at all.
Nope.
Um, so yeah, it's really fun because Bigfoot obviously has been a huge uh, cultural phenomenon in many different cultures. The name Sasquatch has been derived from an indigenous name in British Columbia. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this group, but it's the Halk Emelium language. And the original word is Sasquatch. So that's where Sasquatch had come from. And that's used to describe a large bipedal ape-like creature. It's kind of an umbrella term because even across the world, there's even different versions of Bigfoot, like there's the Yeti and everything like that. So anything that kind of is large, ape-like, and human-like at the same time walks upright is considered to be a Sasquatch. So people, there's been lots of evidence. There's been footprints, audio recordings, witness reports, and everything. Possibly the most famous thing would be the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is the most scrutinized video outside of the RFK shooting. So It's out of the assassination, it's the most like watched video and scrutinized for mistakes or editing and anything like that, which is really interesting. But to top it all off, I want to talk about one of the most famous accounts of a Sasquatch sighting, which was
Ooh.
by Albert Ostman. And this was 100 years ago, actually 101 years ago in 1924. He had an encounter with an entire family of Sasquatches. So listening to this, there's actual audio recordings because this happened in 1924, but he didn't tell anyone, didn't tell a soul about it until 30 years later. But he's been very consistent every single time in his storytelling. He's never wavered on the details. He's never changed his story. Um, and it's really interesting. So let's go right into it. So, in the summer of 1924, a man named Albert Ostman was a Canadian prospector. He headed deep into the wilderness at Toba Inlet in British Columbia. He wasn't searching for gold. Well, he was searching for gold this time on his vacation because he was typically a construction worker. But he was also looking for Bigfoot, what he had heard to have been Bigfoot, anyways. There had been a lot of reports in the areas of campsites being disturbed, food going missing, but there was never any tracks or any signs. Things were just gone. So, when Albert decided to go on this vacation, he was led up into the woods by an indigenous leader. And this is where he got a little bit of details about Sasquatch. Here, he was told by this man that Sasquatch would be seen, that he would likely steal his food, but that he was safe and that he wouldn't bother them or bother him. His first few nights while camping were normal, but then things changed. One night he felt something touch his sleeping bag and he bolted upright in his sleep, but there was nothing there. He thought to himself that it must have been a porcupine looking for food or something, so he left out salt out of the bag the next day because porcupines really like salt. So he thought that, that would just deter it from digging through all of his belongings. But the most important thing is that he was deep in the woods and he was alone. And the second night, or the next night, the same thing had happened. He had felt something in his sleep, and he had noticed that in the morning, a tin of pancake mix, like flour to make pancakes, was missing, but the salt had been untouched, which he thought was really weird. The fourth night, everything changed for him. Albert woke up in a strange sensation. He was moving. And first, he thought that there must have been a mudslide and that his tent was moving and he was just sliding down. But when he tried to move and when he tried to scream for help, he couldn't because he was stuck in his sleeping bag. His sleeping bag had been drawn tight and he was being carried. Now, this part of the story is a little bit weird because when he talks about it, he says that he's in this uncomfortable position where he's being held almost in a sitting position and his leg is bent and he's extremely uncomfortable and extremely hot. And he can feel something holding him and carrying him for over an hour. This, for me, a little bit of the being a skeptic, holy, couldn't say that word, is I don't know why he wouldn't just start screaming. I don't know how the sleeping bag is blocking your voice, but we'll continue. So he's being carried, and he describes it as being carried by a huge man, but bigger than any man could be. He could feel the steps, long, slow, and powerful. He could feel himself going up an incline, and with each step getting raised higher and higher. And at this point, all he could hear was this being's deep breathing and the occasional cough. And that's when he came to the conclusion that it must be Sasquatch. He drifted in and out of consciousness, and then finally arrived at the new location, which was beside a cliff. He got himself out of his bag and he saw a family of Sasquatches surrounding him. Now, in this, there's different interpretations, but what he describes as seeing is a mother, a father, and then two kids, a boy and a girl. And he describes the father as the largest of the bunch, and it seemed as though the mother was angry with him for bringing this human back to their dwelling, but that they were communicating in a series of grunts and gestures, not talking like humans would. He talks about the mother's hips and makes a comment that a bra would have done her well,
Damn,
which is
damn,
weird
damn,
because
damn.
it's an animal, but okay. Um, but besides the whole point, he was surrounded by four Sasquatches. Um, the mother had wide hips and thick hair. The children were curious and they crept towards him and they were sniffing and grunting. Albert tried to run, but he was high on a rocky ledge and they brought him somewhere that he couldn't escape. For 6 days, he reports that he lived among them, where he watched them constantly. They traded food with him. They had roots and sweet grass and a salty plant, and for that he traded raisins and biscuits. The big male would grunt commands to the others, and they didn't really speak, but they understood routines. Like I said, he believed they communicated in gestures with small vocalizations, that they were intelligent, curious, not human, but very close. On the sixth day, Albert hatched a plan. Apparently, the father, loved tobacco. So Albert left a tin where the creature could find it, and he ate the whole thing. And within minutes, the Sasquatch began to stumble, was coughing, groaning, and collapsed. Albert grabbed his rifle, he grabbed his gear, and he ran. And he didn't stop until he reached the water and he flagged down a boat and made it back into town. So, for 30 years, he didn't tell a single soul. But when he was in 1957, he finally came public with the story. Ever since, he was calm, consistent. He never profited off of the tale and never once said that he was lying. And
Wow.
that's my story from Albert about Bigfoot.
Wow. Also disappointing, yet so usual to sexualize that lady Sasquatch.
I know, like,
I was like, can we just leave that part of the story like out?
I know. He was talking about her hips and how she could have benefited from one of those brasiers that women seem to be wearing these days.
Like,
Like, come on.
Christ, like let this lady live.
I know, leave it to a man to just ruin things, even an encounter with Bigfoot.
Yeah, why do you think they took him in the first place?
I don't know. A lot of people think that they're curious about humans. I mean, he might have been speculating that they wanted his stuff. Uh, Most other stories surrounding Bigfoot and Sasquatch is that they're non-confrontational, that they don't like to interact with people, that sometimes the closest interaction people will have with them is when they steal something from their campsite. So for them to have taken him for 6 days and held him captive is interesting, but maybe they were just curious, thought we outnumber this little man and maybe we can do it. Um,
Also,
but I'm not sure.
they probably knew he was interested in them, right? Because I wonder if maybe like I feel like if you were to stay hidden for so long, you'd have to be really good at surveillance. So I feel like what if they were actually watching him while he was walking up with that indigenous person talking about the Sasquatches, so they knew he was interested.
Yeah, that could totally be part of it. But there's been so many expeditions that people have done where they've been hunting Bigfoot, and it's been TV series and it's been on movies and documentaries, and people have been doing it for so long. So I think that there have been more people who have been more intentional on seeing Bigfoot, but maybe it depends on the intention. Maybe they don't want to be like thrown around to everybody. They don't want everyone, I don't know, they
Oh
want to be,
yeah,
they don't want to be a spectacle. They don't want to be analyzed by scientists. Like, you know what I mean?
they'd be hunted
Yeah. But one of
and
the
probably
biggest,
killed.
yeah. Or put in a zoo or something like,
Oh, that'd be terrible.
one of the biggest theories around for the skeptics surrounding Bigfoot is that it's actually a large primate. So I'm trying to find where I wrote this down. Gigantopithecus, which is the
Oh.
largest primate in fossilization. So it was reported to have lived 9 million to 100,000 years ago and lived in the Southeast and Central Asia. It's a relative of the orangutan, and it's probably the most founded like answer to Bigfoot that people claim. Um,
Which would make sense, right? Because that would be when Pangea was still together, right?
yeah, and the crossover, it does crossover, I guess, with when humans were in this world, the first humans. So they think that maybe that they even a human person and a gigantopithecus could have mated and then created Bigfoot out of that. But then when you talk about it, even in Albert's description, he describes them as having extremely long limbs, like they're long, their
Mm-hmm.
arms had almost reached the ground. And when you think about an orangutan, that's exactly how they look. Like they have
Oh.
really long arms, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just like drag on the ground. They walk upright. They have red hair, like a lot of the similarities between how
Right.
people have described Bigfoot to be. Um, One of the key distinctions is that Bigfoot apparently walks with bent knees, whereas humans, we lock our knees when we walk. So that's like the distinction between human and primate. If you were to get up right now, you'd be like
Yeah,
almost
locked. Yeah.
bow-legged if you try to keep your knees bent. But I
Interesting.
do think that there is a lot of merit in the fact that these stories have existed for time immemorial almost, as long as we can remember. People have been talking about a large, hairy creature in the woods. And it's throughout many indigenous cultures, indigenous oral traditions that have been passed down from generations. So there's different interpretations of Sasquatch in indigenous cultures as well, where in the Northwest, they hold him with great respect. They think of him as a special kind of being because of their close relationships with humans. But then there's and they view it as like so this is where I got it off of this website that was based in Oregon, and it was talking about how indigenous groups there were viewing Bigfoot more as a being, like a physical aspect, but then there's some other indigenous groups where they view him as a spiritual aspect, where he only comes into our world to teach people a lesson or when people are in need of him to kind of show guidance, and then he'll go back into his own other dimension. But the one consensus is that he stands like on this border of human and animal. So he is very powerful in essence just because of that relationship of building that bridge there. So he is just very respected across indigenous communities. He's not really thought to be like aggressive or someone to be scared of.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too, because I feel like what if instead of it being like a woo-woo other dimension, like the other dimension being the natural world, and we're so far removed from the natural world at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, our world is so big. Like, I fully believe that something could exist if it doesn't want to be seen.
Oh yeah, and especially if it can be in the trees. And like I'm pretty sure there's a lot of like Bigfoot sightings in like Appalachia, right? Because in the Appalachian Mountains because it spans like such a long distance. And
Mhm.
once you're in the wilderness like in the mountains, you're pretty much alone in certain spots.
Yeah, well, and just think about it. One of the podcasts I was listening to talked about, I think it was, um, I can't remember which one it was, but it was talking about how there have been so many reports throughout time of giant squids existing. And they'd only found a giant squid within like the past 15 years, like
Hmm.
evidence, physical evidence of a giant squid, but it's been reported for lifetimes.
Yeah, and there is like they're like you said, they're real. They exist.
Yeah, like, so I mean, just because we haven't seen anything doesn't mean. anything. But
Yeah.
I really like that, especially in some indigenous cultures, how Bigfoot like represents guidance and knowing. I really appreciate that, and I like that he's a gentle guy, and that people aren't really that afraid of him.
Hmm. Wow, that's crazy. I do wonder if like he or they or whatever, they actually can speak, but they're not going to give all their secrets away to like a stranger, right?
Have you heard that theory about monkeys?
That they can speak, but they just
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I've
I
heard that
have,
they know how to speak and they just choose not to because they don't want to be like caught by humans, basically.
oh, interesting. I mean, that would make
Yeah.
sense. I also was wondering, I was like, if you've heard a lot about like the race of giants that like taught people how to farm and like how to read the stars, right after the Younger Dryas, which was like an apocalyptic event that like wiped out a bunch of people. So I almost wonder too if like maybe that's a possibility because that's all over history as well. And by the sounds of it, these people are pretty tall, or these Bigfoots.
Yeah. I mean, they could be up to 15 feet, which is insane.
Hmm.
Like
That's
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else to say about Bigfoot?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. So let's get into Marie Laveau now. So picture this. It's a midsummer's night. A warm summer breeze kisses your skin. You stand under the light of the moon on a large balcony in the French Quarter in the heart of New Orleans, a city rich with mystical lore where voodoo is openly practiced, and the city is rife with rumors of vampires and witches. The sound of music wafts by you from the party inside. On the street below, partygoers and revelers stroll by. It is the mid 1800s, and you're in the deep south. The sounds of French, Creole, and English float past you from the revelers below. You head inside to the party, where there's a sea of black and white faces. Most of the white people are the creme de la creme of New Orleans, the most powerful people in the city, with deep pockets that are filled with the profits of the slave trade. Most of the black people in the room are slaves. A slave's life here is brutal, with many of them only living until the age of 25, dying from the brutal heat and even more brutal working conditions. Everyone is categorized by their skin color. Mixed race people or people with an eighth or a quarter black are treated differently, put on a higher level of society, but lower than white folks. Some black people are even born free. Their parents or grandparents were able to buy their freedom. You walk into the party. You sit down at a round table with New Orleans elite and listen to the upbeat notes of the jazz band in the corner. In the next minute, the music seems to quiet down, and every face in the ballroom turns to the woman who just walked in. She is a breathtakingly beautiful black woman. She has full lips and eyes that seem to see everything. She wears a scarf upon her head, and she's wearing the most beautiful robes. A black python that looks as though it could kill a man is wrapped around her shoulders. A hush falls over the room, and it's like a chill of ice wafted through the crowd. The woman stands tall with her chin held high. Some ladies titter nervously, and the men gaze at the woman with lust and fear in their eyes. A blonde woman leans towards you and whispers, "That's Marie Laveau, a free black woman and the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans." Marie looks at you, stares into your soul like she just heard the exchange, and you freeze, feeling like she can see right into your very soul and know all of your secrets. The spell breaks and men surge towards her, but none approach too close, all talking to her with a deep reverence and respect. "How is she free, you ask?" The blonde lady replies, "Her grandmother bought her freedom by selling goods, and her mother was born enslaved to her owner. Her grandmother worked tirelessly to be able to buy her child's freedom, but in the end, her mother was freed by her father, who was her owner. This sentence startles you and gives you a harsh reminder of the brutal conditions of slaves, particularly girls who were forced and hardly even coerced into intercourse with their masters. The lady continues. So her mother was free, and Marie's father was a wealthy free man of color. He was so important that he served as an interim mayor for New Orleans. You shake your head at the stark contrast of power and wonder how that even makes sense. Another lady at the table says, I heard her first husband disappeared without a trace. Someone else chimes in. Marie's house was going to be taken away by debtors, but somehow she got it back. Her husband, a wealthy Frenchman, Christophe Dominique, bought the house back, and through some loophole in the law was able to marry Marie, as he proclaimed he was 1/8 black and therefore able to marry a black woman. The blonde lady speaks again. Oh, she's my hairdresser, and she knows everyone's secrets in the city. That's why all the men are afraid of her, because she knows their dirty laundry. It's said that she has a network of spies all throughout the city, so nothing happens in New Orleans that Marie doesn't know about. She has great influence. She's the Voodoo Queen for a reason. Some say that she even got land because a wealthy man went to her after his son was put on trial for killing two Creole women. He went to Marie and begged her to free his son, begged her to do anything. Marie said that she would for a cost. She would do this if she got some land and a house out of it. The wealthy man agreed. So Marie went to a chapel where she offered a penance of pain. She put 3 chili peppers under her tongue and stayed in that chapel for 9 days and 9 nights praying that this man would go free. She then put the chili peppers under the jurors' chairs, under the judge's chair, and under the chair of the man who was accused of killing the Creole woman. In the end, the man was freed, and Marie got a house and land. A brunette woman leans in and whispers, oh, she's magical, all right. Every Sunday, she leads Code Noir at Congo Square, which is where all the black slaves congregate after Mass and perform voodoo, and she leads the rituals. She leads ritualistic dances and even invites white men and black women to her cabin, where the white men pay to chase black girls around under the darkness of night, and it tricks them into a placage relationship, she says with a sneer. Clearly, this woman's been burned by a placage. What's placage, you ask? The woman replies, it's how white men are able to have relationships with a black woman. They enter a placage relationship. It's meant to only serve the time before a man gets married, but they have children by these women and end up providing a house and a home for them and probably a better life because their children are mixed race and will likely probably be freed by the man. Marie even encourages it. She makes these men, white men, pay to chase these black girls around, and many of the men end up falling in love with these girls. And it's the only loophole that allows them to be together. It's almost like a spell itself, the lady beside you mutters. You can't help but agree. Another lady chimes in, I heard they're going to stop doing public executions because of her. Marie always works with the sick. With any influencer outbreak, she's the first one there. She's an amazing healer. She's also known to help work with the inmates on death row, some of them vanishing without a trace before their execution. One day, she didn't want 2 men to be executed, so she went to all the high-ranking people in the city and pled their case. Unfortunately, the execution was set to happen. She kicked up a real fuss about it, but on the day of the execution, and Marie sat front row. There was a large crowd, and it was a sunny day without a cloud in sight. As the executioner put the noose around both men's necks, all of a sudden, dark black clouds thundered into the sky, covering the light of the sun. The executioner gulped and looked at Marie nervously. Her beautiful face held the look of thunder, the python around her neck, intently staring at the executioner. As the lever was pulled, the noose fell from around both men's necks and they fell free. It was an act of God. Or an act of voodoo, someone else chimed in. The men in the end were still executed, unfortunately, even though they fell free. But that was the last public execution in New Orleans. People say they still see Marie's ghost in New Orleans. People leave markings on her tomb, markings of X's and offerings of combs and tobacco and other things that they like. Some people say that they see her ghost wandering by her tomb, or they'll see her transform into a crow. There's been many sightings of Marie throughout New Orleans, and she's remained one of the most well-known people in all of the city. So that's a couple of stories of Marie Laveau. There's a lot more. She is a wildly impressive woman. I just don't even get it. Like people were saying that she was like the mayor of New Orleans, like unofficially. Like they respected her so much. And she was born in 1800. Slavery wasn't abolished until 1864. So the fact that this like black woman
Yeah.
was so respected and revered and is
And I love
crazy to me.
someone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
And weirdly, so she had slaves.
okay.
And she had her husband bought them. So he was like, but she seems to have this amazing ability to find loopholes. Like they say that her husband was like an eighth black, but he was a wealthy Frenchman. So I almost wonder, was he actually an eighth black or did he just say that so that he
Yeah.
could marry her? But they bought and sold eight slaves like in their lifetime. But one of the slaves she owned for 3 days. Then she sold to someone else. And that other person that bought the slave paid with Spanish currency, but that currency was now like defunct. So through the laws of the slave trade in the time in Louisiana, that made it so that that woman was a free woman because she was bought with a currency that didn't work.
Oh,
And the man that Marie actually tried to sell this woman to was someone that was in love with this woman. So she like ended up like getting them together.
yeah. Well, it
And
seemed like she liked to do that too with that spell thing she had where they would chase each other and kind of make little love stories that way too.
yeah, like that, like the placage relationships, honestly, from the outset sound terrible because it's awful, right? Like you're basically using a black woman until you can get married. But then from the sounds of what's actually happening, it sounds like these people are falling in love and that's just the way that they can be together. But then if we also think about that time and that era where so many black people were still enslaved, it seems like she's helping it. Like she's helping people and their children get a better life by setting them up with white men, as terrible as it is. Like she's using the system.
Yeah, well, it's just a fact of the time that if you were with a white man, you would have a better life. Like, that just
Hmm.
is part of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And your
And like
children would
maybe
have a
she
better life.
experienced that herself with her husband and everything, and just kind of wanted that. Like it's almost a survival skill, like a survival tactic in a way to choose your spouse, especially if they're at that time, so that you would have a better life. Yeah.
Yeah, and your kids would have a better life, right? Like it's
Mm.
even when I read the stories, like there's a lot of words that we wouldn't use today, like words to divide how much people like how much blackness basically people have in their blood. And basically, like, however much whiteness you have, you're like elevated to this different level in society. Like, it's not the same. But she was also said to help people moving through the Underground Railroad, like up to Canada. So she would give them like charms. And so there is a part of me that wonders, like, was her owning slaves also just a front for her to help people get through the Underground Railroad? And it also makes me think a lot about how she had a network of spies like throughout the city where she was able to get a lot of information. And because she had that information, she was able to raise herself to this level of prestige. And it just honestly, it speaks to me. Like, I know she's like a voodoo queen, there's lots of magic stories about her, but to me, she really sounds like just an extremely intelligent woman that just had balls and that like really leaned into her sexuality, her beauty, and in some ways like working with a twisted system. Like, Black women were very sexualized,
Hmm.
and that like their like sexual nature was like over, maybe not overhyped, but like really focused upon. And so she like leans into that, but then leans into the fear of like having a python around her neck, and she's a voodoo queen. So it's like lusted after, but feared and respected enough that no one's gonna come after her herself. I don't know. I just, wow.
Yeah, I think there's even just with the title of Voodoo Queen, I think that there's like it almost gives you this bubble of protection.
Yeah.
Because I had just listened on different podcasts actually to the story of a voodoo priest. And this was very interesting. It was true crime related, and this person was getting away with murder essentially for a long time. So then he got titled like the voodoo priest because he was like untouchable, and then people feared him just with that title, and everything. So I feel like that also had to do with hers, and I love that she just embraced it and fully encapsulated that title with the snake and everything, and just walking to a room, and it's almost like she attracts that attention from everyone and almost demands it at the same time. It seems
Yeah.
like I'm here now. Look at me. I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Totally. And I think too, like voodoo in itself isn't inherently scary. Like,
Mm-mm.
I think what kind of what we're seeing is like a byproduct of, people from Africa coming over where Vodun was practiced. And it's like, from what I don't know very much about it, from what I've heard though, it is just like a beautiful practice. It's a spiritual practice, but it was like Hollywood and this type of stuff that made it into something scary. I think probably because of certain sacrifices that are made, like, rabbit's blood or whatever. Like I said, I don't know so much about it, but I do know there is like blood and some sacrifices. But that's not any different than a lot of other cultures and religions, like Mesopotamia, polytheism. They would offer like goats or whatever, like anything to the gods. So it's not bad if it's actually normal in a way.
Yeah, I think that voodooism is linked to like black people, which is another reason why it's got such a negative stereotype, because I think it is like, again, I might be talking out of my ass, so let me not preach to anyone right now, but I think that it does have links to like black culture, African culture, um, and I think that might be where some of the origins are. And then just because racism, people inherently make it out to be something evil because it's tied to black culture, which I think could also have an impact on that as well.
Oh, I think it absolutely does. But yeah, I definitely think the fear and the racism definitely perpetuated that. Also, when you're bringing a bunch of people in, an ability, something to squash a large group of people. And at this time, like in 1811, there was revolts that happened in Haiti where a bunch of Haitian slaves revolted against the white folks and like
Yeah.
basically killed them all, right? So
Mhm.
this was something that was people in New Orleans were very aware of. They stopped getting slaves from Haiti and they started taking slaves from the northern parts where, like, summer wasn't year round. So they would bring the slaves during the winter down to the south. And they were thought to try to not get people from Haiti because they didn't want that like revolutionary spirit. And then when you give people their spirituality, and particularly a spirituality that you perceive to hold power and that you don't fully understand, you do end up trying to squash that if you're trying to oppress a large group of people, which they were. And I think it was later, like voodoo was allowed to be openly practiced, but all slaves had to be Catholic. So it was, you were openly Catholic, but then you were also allowed to openly practice voodoo. And it wasn't until years later that voodoo was then outlawed. And I
Mm.
wonder if that was part of the reason, was to keep a group of people down, right?
Yeah, I think that that 100% was at least part of the intention. And I think you could just see that throughout all of colonization and stuff too. It's just like, oh no, other cultures, that's bad. That's bad stuff. We are the only good thing.
Yeah.
We practice what we preach. That's the only thing that people should follow.
Yeah. And what's crazy though is like what I just can't seem to wrap my head around was like she's living in the heart of slavery where everyone is profiting, at least in the South, off of slavery. You have extremely cheap labor. Like this is something that's thriving. And Marie was not like down on her luck. Like there was definitely times where there were times of uncertainty, like where, her house might get taken by debtors after she lost her first husband, but she seems to always make it work for herself. And if you actually look at St. Anne's Cottage where Marie lived, it is a beautiful estate. Like it is an estate. Like she is a wealthy woman of prominence and like excellence within the New Orleans society. And like I just can't fathom like that is how that even works in a
I know.
society that's also, you know, okay with slavery.
I know, and to be someone who's like respected and feared at the same time is so big, especially because you would think it would be that she was just hated by the general public because she was a black woman and she had all this other stuff going on that they didn't agree with. Like you think that they would have the opposite reaction to her, but it was almost like she was, yeah, like respected, feared, and untouchable in a way, which I respect. I respect her.
Yeah, very, very cool. People even say like with her ghost, there's a story of, I think it was in the 1950s. Um, there was two young men in like a grocery store or whatever. There was a cashier and someone walking through the aisles. The person walking through the aisles was heading to the cashier, and all of a sudden he hears the door open and the cashier standing frozen with like a look of like fear on his face because he's seeing a woman in garb from 40, 50 years ago, because it's the mid
Yeah.
1900s. And the guy who was walking the grocery store finally sees, and he sees this like beautiful woman with a python around her neck. And she says to him, she goes, "Do you not know who I am?" And the man is filled with a sense of fear. And then all of a sudden, she like basically collapses into this like black cloud of air and zooms over to the cemetery where she's buried. And then the other guy goes, "That's Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen." And other people will like see, there's lots of stories of them seeing her like walking around her grave and transforming into a crow and flying away. But what I love about her is that she's like this, almost like this Robin Hood character, because they even say that like because she worked with inmates on death row and she was working like with people with the plague, and people would like die enough to be proclaimed dead. But it was also said that she might have given them this tincture that comes from a blowfish that can make it seem like you're dead, that can basically make it so that your heartbeat slows and you'd be pronounced dead, but you would wake up later and crawl out of the grave or whatever it was.
Oh my God, no. That's my biggest, that's the
Yeah,
origin. biggest fear
Yeah.
is being buried alive.
Yeah, scary, scary, scary. But she just she seems like a great person that used that fear to her advantage.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the story of Marie Laveau and the Sasquatch. Okay, guys. Well, let us
Oh,
know if you want us to do more episodes like this, more storytime episodes with Shae. And yeah, please write in your thoughts. What do you think about the Sasquatch? Have you ever seen a Sasquatch? What do you think about Marie Laveau? Was she a voodoo queen, a political power player, or yeah, I just want to hear or what stories have you heard? And what stories would you like us to cover next? Please like, comment, and subscribe to Life in the Cosmos, available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Castbox, Prime, like wherever you get your podcasts, really. And have a very wonderful day. Bye.
bye.